Welcome back to Sika Strength and welcome back to the Sika Stand news show, brought to you, of course, as always, by the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android. If you'll allow me several seconds for an elevator pitch on what it can do for your training. First of all, Weightlifter finished the RTA weightlifting, hit 4 kilo PB in his snatch and clean and jerks. He went to 100-127, plus 10 kilos on his front squat, 150 kilos, 100 kilo snatch, milestone 2 at 82 kilo body weight.
Nice.
And just the second one there, Nicholas hit a 270 kilo back squat, 10 kilo PB, super clean and tidy on the Road to Near Squat program. Check out the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android, where basically the whole idea is you'll save your time in training and stop wasting months and years not making progress.
And your dreams will come true.
As long as they're training related dreams. Now, first up, Sika Strength posted this. Fucking dumbasses. No, Sika Strength posted Sohrab Moradi back training. So I screen recorded a load of his stuff, and it looked like he was doing a bit of training. There was like a few 150 power cleans and stuff, and I was like, weird, no snatches. Then he just started putting up a 200 kilo clean, 240 kilo front squat, 170 kilo clean and jerk. There was 170 kilo power clean and jerk, 240 kilo squats. So there's been no snatches. I think he's still kind of messing around, but messing around for one of the greatest weightlifters ever is casual 200 kilo cleans. Sohrab's in his mid-30s, retired mostly because he didn't make the Olympics last time, mostly because he dislocated his shoulder snatching incredibly heavy. But that'll tell you, we talk about this a lot, people's genetics, and we're like, oh, some people are unicorns. Kelly Starrett called them unicorns. You know a unicorn when you see one, but this is just how far ahead some people are in terms of the physical attributes that we like to watch, and because we like to watch weightlifting, Sohrab Moradi is one of those people where he's just so far ahead.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense for most of us to think about, if you're training recreationally, even if you take it quite seriously, to be up this close. And it's not only to be this close to like crazy weights, but this close to incredibly competitive weights on a world stage, when he's just messing around. Like, he's just kind of tipping away. He's wearing a pair of Jordan basketball shorts and he's still hitting those amazing weights. Why I really love watching him is that first pull is so pronounced. He gets back to that vertical shin position so well. It's incredibly hard to do. It's incredibly hard to have a back that's strong enough to be able to do it. But his bar path is impeccable. You really see it there in that 200 kilo clean.
Another lifter who gets that barbell into the hip pocket without compromising with arm bend. To be honest, the craziest thing is I could see big squats being pretty casual if you're doing a little bit of training, but a 240 kilo front squat is not something that generally is in the realms of casual, because most people will never even squat 240, not a mind front squat it. So hopefully he keeps going up in numbers. I assume he's not snatching because he's shoulder, and probably just enjoys a little bit of cleaning and squatting, as freaks are wont to do. Oh, that's me. Not supposed to be there.
Who's that guy?
Who is he? Now here we got Ruslan Nuradinov doing a 210 kilo clean front squat and jerk.
Yeah, I absolutely love Ruslan's technique. So he's obviously been weightlifting a long time. I was saying it to Owen earlier. I feel like he's been weightlifting forever at like a senior international level. You just see how powerful he is on his jerks in particular. He kind of pops the bar off his chest. He has that open hand position that does work well for some of the kind of international elite, but he really fires the barbell up. And obviously that front squat is not a front squat to be sneezed at, but he absolutely flies through that complex. If it was me and if it was one of my athletes, this is what I like to see with the complex work. I like to see people moving quite quickly from exercise to exercise. Obviously, in this case, where the bar is in the air as he kind of starts the front squat, you don't need to go quite that quickly, but certainly not wasting time taking a lot of breaths, re-bracing before the front squat, and then taking a lot of time between the jerk really doesn't help with the complexes.
My favourite part about this whole post is not the actual lift, but Ilya commented and said, "Handsome boy, great job," which is very nice to see. Next up, we've got Yang Jae, who is a super heavyweight from Korea. He puts up a lot of big lifts, but two most recent lifts he put up here was a 330 kilo clean deadlift, which, you know, we don't get to see weightlifters pull super heavy that often. Not a pun on the super. And he also put up this 320 kilo back squat where the clip fell off. Now, I've been saying this recently. We did a Thian Tao retirement video last week, and we were talking about how few weightlifters have squatted 320 over the decades, and if you ever squat 320 as a weightlifter, especially if you're not a super heavyweight, you're in a class of your own, but if you include the super heavyweights, you're still in a very small group. So squatting 320, I know it's easy to look at Lasha and see Lasha probably squat 360 or 370, or Mart same do 400, but that's like 2 people out of an absolutely huge number of people who do squats ever. So the 320 high bar is something else.
I think the thing with the super heavyweight class as well is the fact that they have a lineage there. You can compare them to super heavies across all the decades. We don't have that with the other weight classes, obviously, because the other weight classes have changed around and chopped and changed a good few times over the years. But with the super heavies, you get this idea of what an amazing squat is, and 320 is definitely right up there.
The other thing as well is, in decades gone by, we didn't get to see a whole lot of squats, in training. We used to see some of the bigger ones, like from, Stefan Botev and stuff like that. But it'd be interesting to see in actual numbers, because when you do the competition numbers, you can see how many people have done triple bodyweight clean and jerks or whatever, but no one has unfortunately, the notes for who squatted 320 or whatever. Next, we got Lee Sang-yong. So he seems to have returned home from what I can gather from this. So he's not going to the Olympics. So I'd imagine he's taking a little bit of respite from the national team, and that's from what we gathered last year when we were there. They do seem to go through seasons or times in that national team when you're preparing for stuff, and it's of varying lengths, and they do try to go home at times. And funny, when we were there on a Friday evening, the atmosphere was literally people rushing home to get home from work. So if training finished at like 4:30 and everyone was going home for the weekend or back to the barracks or the accommodation. Barracks is probably the wrong word, but it really felt like people were leaving work to go home early. But anyway, here's a 250 kilo triple for Lee Sang-yong. So I'm still on the train of hoping we'll see a massive squat from him. I really want to see 275 or 280. I just would really be chuffed with that.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Hopefully he does peak his squat in the next couple of months. An interesting thing with these is these appear to be noticeably deeper than what we've seen when he was doing a lot of the volume work in the National Training Centre. So maybe this is a bit of a step back. Obviously, his squat, 250 for reps like this, is very much in the tank for him. It's nowhere near maximal. He could probably double the amount of reps he's doing here with 250. Not with ease, but certainly he's capable of doing it. So what we might be seeing here is just a bit of a slightly lighter session, going a bit deeper. No use of that kind of bounce out of the bottom position. Again, very, very controlled. Same speed on the way down as it is on the way up. As always, his squats do look impeccable.
The big thing about Lee Sang-yong's squat, and you've hopefully heard us talk about this a load, but people worry too much about their anatomy or what height they're, and they're 5'9" and 3/4, so that means they can't do back squats. But if you have a back like Lee Sang-yong and you've got ankle mobility, I bet you can do a massive high bar squat. If you can super strong back, maintain rigid position, zero change in extension or flexion in his back, in his upper back primarily, we're looking at that position throughout the squat, or visible change. That is one of the biggest things, is that upper back rigidity when it comes to squatting. If you can get just a stupid strong back, no matter what your anatomy is, no matter how tall you are, if you can have an absolute beast of an upper back, you have such a great chance of having a great squat. And it's something that is definitely forgotten about quite frequently in big squats. Next up, we've got one of the Egyptian team, Yasar Osama, with 170 kilo snatch.
Now, the standout thing for this, for me, is when we look at it, how similar it looks to the young Miso Hassano when he was coming up, particularly in that speed of the pull under and that catch position.
Oh, I thought you meant the hair.
A lot of the Egyptian national team have that incredible overhead position, an overhead position we don't see a lot of other nations getting to. A small but more forward incline with the torso, the head being very much out in front, and we even see it now in Miso's current condition. When he is a full senior athlete, he still has that slightly forward lean in the torso, but this is a lovely snatch.
170 is another one of those numbers which I think are just massive benchmarks, no matter where you do it from, pretty much no matter what body weight you do it from. If you ever snatch 170 in weightlifting, in training, from low blocks with snatch, in competition as a 69, it doesn't matter. If you snatch 170 at any point in your career as a weightlifter, you are one in thousands. You're an incredible weightlifter. So I feel like that 170 mark, probably for him, he's like, man, I'm not snatching 185, but for a lot of people weightlifting, that 170 is an absolute gargantuan lift, and seems to be a lot of lifters knocking around in Egypt currently, which is great to see, as they are, they put a lot of effort into their weightlifting. Next up, we have got Lasha. Lasha's changed up his training environment, and he's done a 205 kilo snatch balance and 220 kilo no foot snatch balance.
The big standout thing with Lasha and the snatch balance is every time I see him snatch balance, it just looks so controlled. Like what it looks like is a lot of time we get weightlifters coming into the training hall or starting their training session, they'll do some snatch balances, particularly the kind of no foot variation. And in the first few sets, they're just slowly moving the bar around. Now, obviously, this isn't slow, but it's just how controlled that weight is. For most people, even the super heavies, the massive kind of contraction and then big relaxation afterwards is really pronounced. In Lasha's case, particularly because it's a no foot one, he kind of presses and moves at the same time. It is a noted change from what we'd usually expect from a snatch balance, and definitely I'd say we could easily see Lasha do 240 on this.
So we are probably going to see Lasha at these last Olympics. So if you are in Paris weightlifting and you see us, please do feel free to come up and say hello and possibly buy us a pint. But in regards to Lasha's performance, we're probably going to see his last Olympics, which I feel very excited to see. Not only are we going to watch weightlifting, obviously, but we'll get to see maybe one of the greatest weightlifters, not maybe one of the greatest weightlifters at his last competition in terms of maybe the Olympics. I could see him doing a few more Europeans or Worlds, maybe, but I think there's a strong chance we won't see him in LA. So it would be, it's great to get a chance to see that. So hopefully, I'm still confident he's winning gold.
Yeah, I'm very confident in him, particularly seeing him back to what I consider standard Lasha training now.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Next, we've got Riski. So Riski says preparing for Paris. This is from Henry Luzaujean. So I think he works for Luzaujean Barbell, and he has this training clip of Riski snatching 160. Now Riski doesn't seem to put up any training videos himself. A lot of international weightlifters just don't even think about it. They don't even think people really want to see that much, or they want to see them like eating ice cream or steak dinners. But really we want to see them lifting. So here's a clip. Very fortunate to see Riski in training, snatching 160. And I would say the definition of a casual 160, I feel like that's pretty casual.
I would say incredibly sharp.
Yes.
Like this is technically a very, very crisp lift. Usually we see certain things as those weights get a bit heavier in training. There's probably 8 other training sessions have come before this one that week, and we usually see some sort of, not softness, but a bit of a kind of technical breakdown. Maybe we'll see some bounce in the shoulders. Maybe we'll see those arms flexing in a small bit when they're catching the heavier snatches. And that's due to fatigue. So physical fatigue and just psychological fatigue. As we say, the amount of training volume that these international weightlifters do on a weekly and daily basis is incredibly high. So it's nice to see something like this in training where it's so sharp, so fast, and like casual, as you said.
And that casualness comes from that super high volume training, that from super high frequency, multiple day sessions, really high session tonnage, lots of familiarity with those full lifts, incredible athletes, high levels of coordination, diligence, thought behind their technique, always working those positions. And this is what pays off then. You get these sweet moments where you demolish a 160 snatch like that. So, you know, we can all relate to that, can't we?
Yeah.
A little just smashing 160 snatches. Next up, we've got Tima. He is a Russian weightlifter. Tima Dalbayshev. He is never an international team, but I've just been following for a while. And he put up this lovely 180 kilo clean and jerk.
This really solidifies my views that nobody creates split jerkers like the Russians create split jerkers. It's a factor of their system, but also it's a factor of their prioritization of overhead strength. Big strict presses all the time, big strict presses from even their junior members, and then that obviously moving on into massive push presses and an emphasis being put on that in their training. We had this thing for a long time of weightlifters not prioritizing that overhead strength quite so much. It always talk about their legs being really important, and that's what makes the big split jerk. But when we look at the best nation for creating incredibly consistent jerkers, it's always the nations with the heaviest strict presses and heaviest push presses.
Big thing about this as well is the bar pat. So it's a great view from the side. You can see this rearward movement of the barbell. Seen a lot of stuff recently where people are looking at like vertical bar pats and trying to make their bar pat as vertical as possible. And that is really not what you want to be doing. Now, I don't want to rag on anyone or call anyone in particular out, but it is very important to understand that the vertical bar pat is not what we're looking for in weightlifting. And if we're moving the barbell straight up, then we are moving our body center of mass towards that barbell. And if we're hitting a straight pull, we are bringing our hips towards the barbell. We're adding this horizontal momentum. We're going to bump the barbell away from us. We're going to have to chase the barbell forward. This makes it less consistent, more inaccurate, makes it a lot harder to control the barbell. There's so many reasons we don't do this, and the best bar pats are very, very similar shape. Now, it's not going to be the perfect S bar pat because body shape and certain nuances are going to change that slightly, but it fits that template, and it's not vertical at all, so don't fall into that trap. Here we've got Jessie Stemo, who is an American weightlifter, and she's doing this 120 kilo clean front squat and jerk. One of the things I really like about this clean is obviously it's a very, very heavy clean for it's getting up there in the percentages, and she doesn't rely on a huge smash with the hips. What I really like about this is you can see that as it slows down a little bit of contact, which is one to do at heavier weights, you can see her really pulling with the traps and getting very aggressive with that. So sometimes we can rely on this horizontal push with the hips like we were just talking about with the bar pad, but in not pushing away from us, she's relying then on that upper body to pull that barbell up as she pulls herself down underneath at the same time. So she's defaulting to good positions when they get heavier, which is what you want to do with practice and weightlifting. You don't want to resort to good technique all the way up, and then suddenly when you get to heavy weights, you just go back to your old shitty technique. Whereas at heavier weights here, we can see her really pulling with those traps and following the principles that we want to do in that turnover.
The other thing that really stands out here is just how good the timing is in the catch. A lot of the time we get to those heavier percentages like Owen is talking, one of the other breakdowns we see is that people will sit in the bottom position. Now that might be because the barbell was out of position when they got there, might be too far in front of them, maybe they've jumped back and they're adjusting where the barbell is, or more importantly adjusting their center of mass when it's combined with the barbell. So you might see them leaning back, you might see them hiking that bar up, but here we see perfect timing. As that barbell reaches the bottom, she catches the barbell right in the bottom of the squat and really utilizes that stretch shortening cycle very, very well to stand up. So we really don't want to make the hardest aspect of the clean right in the bottom of that catch position. We really don't want to make that any harder, and she does a phenomenal job here of ensuring she gets out of that non-ideal position as quickly as possible.
Next, we've got a 59 kilo weightlifter from France. This is Garance, I believe. That's probably not how you pronounce it in French, but nonetheless, here she is in a competition. I think it's a club championships in France, doing a 102 power clean and split jerk all the way up in her attempts, and she finishes at 102. So 59 kilo weightlifter, superb technique.
Yeah, it's that vertical bar path after that extension is like we were talking about earlier, no pushing the barbell away. The big thing when I look at lifts like this, so a lot of us and a lot of you who are watching this, you might have cleaned this weight before. You might be working towards cleaning into the triple figures and you have an idea for how that barbell feels. But when you do that at the lighter weight classes, you just can't begin to imagine how heavy that is. You're approaching double body weight on the clean here, and I'd hesitate to say if you were to lose 5 kilos off your body mass, if you were 90 kilos, even 80 kilos, and you lost 5 kilos of body mass, just how heavy all the weights would feel. Now think about doing that as a 59 kilo lifter. It really is crazy. I think some of the times we'll see the lighter weight classes and we'll miss the wood for the trees, for want of a better term. Maybe we've moved around weights like this before and you'll have an idea for how it feels. Doing it at the lighter body weight is just so impressive. And then add on the technical prowess on top of that.
A big thing as well in the catch position is the lower back extension, those hips just slightly back. A lot of times we do heavy power cleans, weightlifters included, we can push those hips really far forward, get a lot of forward knee travel, and we end up in this kind of rounded upper back position and unstable lower back. So when you catch that clean, you kind of want to be almost slightly back in your heels in the power clean, not in the full clean. But we want this really strong lower back and upper back catch position. If we start in that extension, it makes it a lot easier then for us to end up in that extension in the catch position. Now next up, we've got Olu Strongman, and he is squatting 300 kilos for a set of 5. And on the last rep, he finishes off with just a little pause, making it look just as easy as the first rep without the pause.
Look, I think it's safe to say that he is absolutely making a fool of 300 kilos.
Making a fool of 300 kilos.
300 kilos is going home after work that day thinking, what am I doing with myself? This, for a 5, if they were just all that fast, would be incredibly impressive. It would be unheard of to be that strong. But when you consider that he is now doing a legitimate pause squat, and it's not a stop squat, it's a legitimate pause in the bottom position, it is so strong. The other thing to consider here is it looks like he's squatted 400 kilos around 4 or 5 years ago.
Yep.
So obviously he's been training a long time, and to still be doing these weights is so impressive. A lot of time, most normal people will build up to these crazy peaks, but holding on to those weights for a long time is so difficult. And to be getting back there 4 or 5 years later is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, I think it looks like he might have switched from powerlifting to strongman, so world's strongest man competitor in 2017. So that squat looked like it was done during his strongman competition. So these squats are crazy. Let's just take a quick little look at the 400. Seems we brought it up. So seems to be in competition, and really interesting. He's got a little bit of that kind of Nivaris kind of bow-legged thing going on. We might see a clock off for Toshiki, and you see it predisposes those lifters to a little bit more toe straight forward in that position, and really makes for a powerful squat. A lot of leg engagement there. That was so easy. There's no right to be squatting 400 kilos like that, which is
it's amazing.
Now, sticking with some very strong people, we've got Jan, who is deadlifting 500 kilos on the Trapbar deadlift. Pretty significant range of motion on this. You could look at it and be like, okay, it's Trapbar deadlift, but if you compare that to maybe a sumo deadlift at 500, some of the ones you've seen are pretty minimal range of motion. He's moving this over a conventional deadlift range of motion for some people. You know, it's not nothing in terms of that distance is traveling.
No, absolutely. And the common thing with the trap bar, so when we look at a trap bar, usually they have two handle orientations. So the first handle orientation is what we see here. That's those handles around 4 or 5 inches higher than the center of the plate. When we look at the center of the plate handle position, then most of the time in a trap bar deadlift, we don't use those lower handle positions. You're using the trap bar to be able to use your legs a bit more, to have that torso slightly more vertical. So it's not uncommon to be using those slightly higher handles. And if you've ever loaded up a incredibly heavy trap bar deadlift, oftentimes people who don't do a lot of them will kind of brush them off. They'll say, oh, it's not that valuable. It's kind of halfway between a deadlift and a squat, which it is. But you're moving massive amounts of weight bipedally and getting a huge central nervous system loading. So it is so valuable. If you're a strongman competitor trying to get stronger and you're looking for that maximal contraction, that maximal force being pushed through your legs, it's a very, very useful training tool.
For a lot of people, the problem with the trap bar deadlift is just the balance. So there's a lot of kind of stabilization involved, or a little bit more than the regular deadlift. Now, obviously you have the forward pulling of gravity when you do a straight bar deadlift, but when you're doing the trap bar deadlift, you've got this kind of almost pendulum effect where you're trying to stabilize it, and you can see him as he moves through different positions. You have to put a little bit more work in to keep it in a good position, and if you're not using straps, it can be a little bit harder to maintain that because the jostling can mess with your grip a little bit. So you can see the 500 kilos here. I'd say probably do a bit more if you had space in the barbell, but it looks like he's ran out. Now here we have got Julian in the Gymshark gym doing a 280 kilo single arm deadlift. Don't know. Sorry, I'll just do that again. Oh, it's like a feather in my throat. Next up, we've got Julian doing a 280 kilo single arm deadlift, which I think this has to be the heaviest single arm deadlift I've ever seen. I think Misha Kaklayevas have done pretty big single arm deadlifts, but I don't know if he's on 280.
I don't think so. I don't remember seeing a video if he has done it. I have no idea. I cannot fathom how that feels in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very common if you're coaching people, particularly a kind of group of weightlifters, you'll pick up a barbell with one hand and kind of move it back to the center of the platform for their next attempt, or as you're coaching them, you'll pick up a bar. And when you pick up 60 or 80 kilos like that, it destroys you. It absolutely tears you apart. Your back feels terrible, your hand feels terrible, your shoulders feel terrible. I can't imagine what 280 kilos feels like. Just the ability to keep your torso square, the ability to keep that shoulder pulled back, and then start to drive and deadlift 280 kilos off the floor is so impressive.
Now here we've got BJ Stone, no stranger to the new show, who is a strongman, but he seems to be going through a bit of a weightlifting phase, or what I can gather from his Instagram. It boggles my mind that BJ doesn't have more followers on Instagram, to be honest, because here is a 220 kilo split jerk from the front. Like we're talking about there, that 170 snatch or 320 back squat, if you jerk 220 from anywhere, you have entered the halls of fame in terms of just being a very good athlete in terms of weightlifting movements. There's so few people who've ever jerked 220 that split jerky with this precision and ease has just blown my mind. This is such an impressive lift, especially from a strongman, from anyone.
I think what we're actually seeing here is just how impressive the strongman community is. If we're being honest, like we had Mitchell Hooper a couple of months ago, went through really focusing on his jerk positions. We saw how good his movement was. Now BJ arguably has even better overhead positions, even better technique, very, very nice split jerk. And it's somewhat comical to think that obviously these guys are training. They're training to be strong and powerful, but they're not really training these positions. A lot of the strongman community won't ever train that fully stacked, locked out overhead position because of the fact that so many of their movements are pressing, so many of their movements are multiple reps overhead. But we just see it here. This is the second guy doing this in as many months. And getting up to those, as Owen called them, world-class weights or kind of Hall of Fame weights is insane. It's crazy to think that there's these freak athletes out there and they've just never tried it. Like, in my opinion, it's the same when we see some of the American football players. We'll see the track and field athletes or the throwers moving around weights that weightlifters would absolutely give their left arm to be able to move around. And we just see them picking it up, no bother at all.
Next, we've got the Speedy Boy. So it is Tian. I'm not sure if anyone from New Zealand wants to let me know, but it's Tian. So I assume it is just Tian, like Mr. Tian Tao. He is a sprinter from New Zealand, and he hit this 160 kilo hang split power clean. Now, when we're doing the power variations for athletics, for running, the power snatch or the power clean, we'll most often see people doing the bipedal variation or the squat variation, if you want to call it that, and the split variation is something that is no longer used in weightlifting unless you're old or injured or you just really want to do it. And there's literally no reason you can't use the split variation other than it requires a bit more coordination. You can't get as low and it's not as stable. And sometimes, very rarely, we'll see international track athletes using it. Very, very rarely. We're talking like one in a few thousand making use of that variation, and sometimes it can feel a bit more comfortable for them. Now, generally you would always stick with the squat variation, but you're getting the exact same benefits. You're getting the contracting, relaxing, catching again in the split position. Just that catch position is just a little bit different. Now, I know you might be thinking, oh, would that split position be a bit more transferable to the running? And the answer is not really. It's not really the same mechanics. You can easily get same loading from split squats if you want to do unilateral loading, which you should be doing, but there's no real, oh, I'm moving from a contracted position into that split position. I think we've gone a little bit too far into the realms of super sport specific stuff there. Really what's more important is what can you move the heaviest weight the fastest with in the safest position. And obviously for Jan here, it is the split variation, and that 160 certainly it's got to be beyond that double body weight if I had to guess his body weight.
Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind here, so this split clean or split power clean is very good, right? Technically it's very good, and we're really, when we look at videos like this, you tend to be really focused on that. But when we look at a 160 power clean for an international level sprinter, that is a very, very high number. He's definitely in top 5% of international sprinters there with a 160 power clean. Generally speaking, sprinters will have a good power clean, but we rarely see the numbers going this high. And so not only is it the split variation, but it also is an incredibly high number just for the 1RM.
Next up, we've got one of the Georgian judo athletes, Gurmatashi. Look, Georgian, very hard names to say, I'm sure we'll all agree. But what we can agree on is he is an absolute beast. So we're going through some back squats, some plyometrics, some power cleans, some deadlifts, and he is an absolute unit. Georgians are obviously very, very good at judo, always a lot of very powerful athletes, very, very physical athletes, and I think some of this S&C has given us a good reason why, let alone looking at his physique on top of that.
Yeah, he moves really well, but also just the weights here are very, very heavy. What I love about judo athletes is there is no hiding from the big heavyweights moving fast. Mm-hmm. You know, we'll see it in other combat sports where people will say, oh, I don't need to do this. I'm going to do Bulgarian bags, or I'm going to do kettlebells instead. We really see it in the judo community where it's heavy weights moving fast. We see good power cleans, and we see a big emphasis on plyometrics and sprints. And it really is, when you look at not only the physique of the judo athletes. If we're being honest, most international professional level competitors have great physiques. They have physiques that you would want to have. But when we look at their physical outputs, how robust they are, how heavy the weights they move are, and how well they can move through space, it really does stand to reason that their big focus on S&C pays off massively.
Yeah, like that squats. We always see judo athletes. When you see elite judo athletes squatting, they're always squatting deep, high bar. They're always getting below that parallel. And like Dara said, you just cannot hide. In one of those sports where it's highly skill-based, judo throws are incredibly intricate, but at the same time have to be physical. Like, you can't get away from it, especially the competitors they are against. And you can't hide from those big weights. So we're looking at the squat might be somewhere between 200 to 230. It's hard to tell with the plates. And he certainly looks capable of squatting 230 if I had to guess. So we've got a lot of different movements here, and he is an absolute unit. Now, speaking of units, we've got another unit here coming from Germany, a javelin thrower, Max Detning, who is power snatching or hang power snatching 140 kilos from blocks. He puts up a 145 but isn't quite successful. Clearly has the capacity to power snatch that with a bit of fine tuning to technique, but the successful 140 is without a doubt an extreme display of power and speed.
Yeah, it is so fast. I actually think that's what the throwers do probably better than anyone else, is just how much speed they put into that extension. Now, for weightlifters, we rarely want to be putting absolutely everything into that point of extension, because it's likely we'll have that deviation in bar path. Maybe we'll have a deviation in where our body goes. Maybe we'll jump too far back, or we'll jump forward. But for the throwers, they don't really care about that. What they care about is moving the weight as fast and as powerfully as they possibly can. And you really see it here, just how fast that dip down with the torso and ripping that barbell back overhead goes. It is so impressive.
The cool looking gym as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So here we have got David Montgomery. So this is posted by I think this is his coach. So it's real pep _ AZ. So there is a deadlift in here, which is quite interesting. We don't often see American football players of a high level doing heavy pulls. Something we'll do cleans, obviously, the squats, benching, but we've got a 280 odd kilo clean deadlift there, or deadlift, sorry, not clean deadlift, just a normal deadlift with no straps. Very interesting to see that happening. And then you move on and you see him doing those really powerful Nordic curls or Nordic folds, and it kind of makes sense that he's able to do a bit of both of those. So they're obviously feeding into each other. Very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. For the field athletes, for our field sports athletes, even more than track and field, I think that emphasis on very good range of motion and a lot of power being produced in the hamstrings is so important. Obviously, when we look at field sports, we're really concerned about the amount of time they lose to injury every year. Everybody who's played a field sport, whether that's soccer, hockey, American football, rugby, you'll know just how important the hamstrings are because they tear so frequently. And when you see something like this, like he's going beyond, it's almost a deficit Nordic hamstring curl because he's doing it on a machine and it's so controlled throughout. And then obviously it makes perfect sense when we see that 280 kilo deadlift, just how good it is, how strong he is. The only other thing I want to mention here is when we look at the deadlift setup, we see a slightly wider than normal stance. Now, for a lot of athletes, this is perfectly normal. For a lot of athletes who might have quite tight quads or tight hip flexors, getting down into that deadlift position with that narrower stance that we might see powerlifters doing their conventional deadlifts in is quite difficult. And so just bringing their stance width out slightly, probably an inch on each side, is absolutely perfect. But just doing that allows them to hit those positions a lot easier and a lot more repeatably.
The hamstring training for athletes, anyone running or doing anything athletic with your lower body, which is probably everyone except for arm wrestlers, training the hamstrings is obviously incredibly important. It is a biarticulate muscle. Basically, the muscle is involved in the action of two joints, which isn't always the case. So it is very important to be involved in those and make sure we're adjusting them, especially when it's big muscle groups like that and big joints involved in running. So we want to make sure that we're covering the muscles that do a lot of that action. And the Nordic fall is one that if you can get loading it up and get moving it, it is a fantastic exercise. And it's very honest. Keeps you honest.
There's no hiding from a Nordic hamstring curl.
Next up, we've got the Zach Moss, just to finish up with this, with another American football player, squatting 225 kilos. The very nice squat, high bar. Some people are arguing about depth in the comments, but what we're looking for, I suppose, when we're looking at athletes is it deep enough to get a training effect? And that's certainly deep enough to get a training effect for him. And if you're moving that fast, it's an appreciable range of motion. Like, he's not walking out doing knee bends. He's not doing jerk dips with 225 kilos. He's moving that barbell over a range of motion. We can see his knees moving forward as far as his toes. He's getting relatively deep. Hamstrings look a bit below parallel. Like, he's not a powerlifter. It's not in competition. Is that sufficiently deep enough to give me a training effect? And I would say that's definitely giving him something, especially as those weights get a bit heavier.
Absolutely. Now, the crazy thing here for me is doing this in a pair of Nike running shoes. You'll just see, if you watch it from the time he unracks that bar, how much movement there is in the feet there. It arguably makes this way more impressive that he's able to do it essentially standing on marshmallows. Now, if you're training, even if the weights aren't anywhere near approaching this heavy, please don't do it in your Nike Vaporflies or whatever your spongy running shoes are. It just makes your life a hell of a lot harder. Not only will it make the movement more difficult, but it also limits the amount of actual central nervous system drive that you'll put through. So all of those afferent nerve signals that are going back to your brain are feeding back, telling your brain you're on an unstable surface. Your brain will then limit the amount of neural drive that goes down to the muscles during that movement. So it's definitely more impressive to be doing it in the running shoes. But if you are training yourself and you're training this evening or tomorrow, try not to do it in your running shoes.
I think there's a carbon plate in those Nike shoes. A lot of the newer ones do. So that's actually arguably making it harder than normal running shoes because it's even springier.
Yeah.
Which is even making it a little bit harder. So it's almost some kind of deficit squat. It's like there's a constraint on this squat. So thanks for everyone for watching the new show. Thank you for everyone who sends in DMs into the new show. It makes the new show so much better than it would be if we were looking for ourselves. So we are eternally grateful for that every week, which is why we mention it, as it does include it. We look through every single one of those DMs. And if you see something, weightlifting, powerlifting, track and field, athletes, anything physically impressive, combat sports, anything at all, whatever it is you see, just send that in, click DM, send to Sika Strength. And lots of people send in stuff very, very consistently. So we're really appreciative of that. So do please keep sending those in. And today's new show, of course, is brought to you again by that Sika Strength app. Save yourself time. Just get on the app. A lot of people getting on the app and they don't want to get off the app, because the results are there. And we're updating it about every 6 weeks. There's loads of new things, updating features, always listening to that feedback, always trying to improve on it. And we really want to be the best possible app it can be. And lots of more big updates coming for the rest of the year. Lots of options for everyone who needs it, and even more in the future.